are the great wing shooting destinations of the world, steeped in tradition, offering the pinnacle of shotgun sport. Tour the planet with us.
Welcome to London, home to some of the finest gun makers in the world. Behind me is Purdy, and within a few hundred yards we have Holland & Holland, Asprey, William Evans, and of course Boss. Any wing shooting enthusiast or a man passionate about fine guns, this is a mecca for him.
There's no shortage of ways to spend your time in London. It's a visiting tourist's dream, from the majesty of Buckingham Palace to the Tower of London. For the visiting wing shooter, London features more than 2 centuries of gun manufacturing history. Just by taking a short walk in the right part of the city, you'll come across many of the legendary names that make the London gun trade famous.
If you're in London in July, you aren't going to find many people in the gun makers' shops. You need to go to the CLA Game Fair. Every one of the major London gun makers will be in Gun Makers Row. They'll have moved, lock, stock and barrel. If you want to see them in July, that's where you go.
This time of year, it's outside London, on a drive through the English countryside, where all the gun makers are to be found. This is the Country Land Association Game Fair, a 3-day gala of all there is to the good life lived in the country.
When you get something like 500,000 people gathered in one place celebrating the countryside, hunting in particular, you know, that's a special buzz. You cannot describe, it's a tented city over several hundred acres, and there is everything for the country enthusiast. With the activities and the shows, it's a real who's who of the hunting industry in Europe and particularly worldwide. Many American visitors travel there.
Good boy. Sit. Good dog.
Among the highlights of the game fair is Gunmakers Row, a one-stop collection of the finest custom gun makers in the world today.
Gun Makers Row stretches at least a quarter to half a mile, and you'll have every one of the major makers. I can't name them all. It's an endless list of the who's who in fine gun making. And everybody comes to this show because that's the best exposure in Europe, where you're going to see the most guns and the most opportunity. And obviously there's some bargains to pick up because it's a pretty competitive trade at that point, with everybody being in the same place. Walking down Gun Makers Row, I have the opportunity to visit with many old friends, some of them pretty unique people. Richard Purdy, the great-great-grandson of James Purdy, the famous gun maker. And I have to tell you, no wonder everybody in the world knows the name of that gun maker. It is fascinating.
Yeah, it was founded in 1814 by my great-great-great-grandfather when he set up in business on his own, and he completed his apprenticeship in 1805. So 1882, the doors opened at 57 South Audley Street, and we're still there to this day. If you go around our factory and you talk to our craftsmen, they have enormous pride in their workmanship. They're very proud to work for Purdy's, to be carrying on a tradition and skills which go back 6 generations. And we are passionate about what we do. We are passionate about the quality of our products. And in every successful business, doesn't matter what it is, if you haven't got that passion, you won't succeed.
There's an auctioneer called Nick Holt, a personal friend, but he's a real passionate gun enthusiast and an incredible raconteur as well. And there's nothing better than going to see Nick's display of items that will be coming through his auction house, and you can find some incredible historical gun artifacts there, and that's always worth a visit.
I got a phone call from Kuwait. This gentleman said, I have an 18-carat gold Browning, and I said, okay, yeah, holy Moses. What, barrels included? Yes. Who on earth is going to be brave enough to shoot with something like, you know, this so ostentatious, bling bling? Wow, it's the only John Browning 18 karat gold gun they built. As you can see, you've really got to be a pretty chatty, go-getter kind of individual to be seen with this. And you most certainly, of course, have got to wear sunglasses when you're shooting it. I mean, you imagine the sun on that. I mean, it'll just blind you. It's worth 18,000. With the gold, oof, I don't know.
If you ever get the opportunity to travel, please come over in the summer to England and you'll be made most welcome. And I guarantee you 3 days isn't enough to walk around and see it all.
Visits to events like the CLA Game Fair in England or the Vintage Cup in the United States lure the wing shooter to grand locations, to conjure skies filled with birds, and to experience all the majesty and tradition inherent to the grand sport of wing shooting, right down to the proper attire.
In England we dress quite differently to the American hunter, often over here, often in camo, duck hunting, deer hunting and everything. It's just a tradition in England that's, you know, 100 years old or more now, that, you know, you dress in finery. Each estate has its own tweeds, and that's really stemming from stalking, so that each estate would develop their own tweed to blend in with their countrysides, the color of their rocks and their fauna there. Bird shooting is a little different, the tweeds that they develop for that. But again, each estate would have their own tweed for that. The keepers would all be dressed in it, so they'd all look uniformed. And estate workers in there would certainly have their own tweed there. Traditionally, from well over 100 years now, it's been such a formal event. It'd be a 3 or 4 day shoot at a big house, big castle, etc. And they would, you know, be expected to dress very smartly, you know, on these days.
In Scotland, a traditional pheasant hunt is as much about the ceremony and style as it is about the high-driven birds overhead. Once you look the part, the fun of the shoot really begins.
Peg is just out in the field, out from number 5 there. You'll see it when you get along there. All right, it's directly in line.
You know, in North America, we're more used to shooting birds over dogs, in other words, flushing them, upland bird shooting. And here in Scotland, they're presented in a different manner. The birds are what they call blanked or dogged in, where they gently herd them or push them into cover crops and then drive them from those cover crops up over tall spinneys and coppices, and they come high over the valleys, over the waiting guns, almost like you're blocking in Dakota and the birds come to you as passing shots. And so they're high-driven passing shots. Much more challenging, sometimes maybe 40, 45 yards away, and you've got to be on top of your game, and it's so exciting. When you do clatter one of these down, you'll remember it for the rest of your life. Now that was behind both times. He's too low for you. Here he comes, wait for him. Patience is a virtue. Come up on his beak, he needs about 3 feet. Too far. You've got more time than you think. Now come through about a foot, bang, and again. Behind. So you're not connecting out there. As he's coming, your muzzle should be as if you were shooting him from the hip. So you're moving with him all the time, and that matches the muzzle speed to the target speed, and you get the speed and line of flight. And then you're moving with him, and then as you come up here, just when he gets about here, you just flick through it. No, it's too far. Yeah, coming this way. No, start marking his speed now. Now come through him. You put his leg down, you're behind him. Get on him now. And then come through him, and a bit more than you think. A bit more. You've got it with a second barrel. Nice shot. You've got the gun up like this, and you're watching the bird come in, and then you're not connecting. Then what you do is when it arrives where you want to kill it, and then you're trying to make this move, which is, you're being forced and rushing, because all of a sudden you've got to make this move to a bird. Whereas if you're out there, you don't mount the gun, but you look at it, so you're pointing it as if it was pointing with your finger. So as he's coming, you're moving with him all the time. Now what you've done now is matched your muzzle speed to the target speed. The trigonometry is 1/8 of an inch, is a couple of feet out there. Back here, the bird's got the angle-dangle advantage on you. So you never take them over your head if you can help it.
You're doing way much thinking at that point.
Yeah.
I'm not used to not that thinking.
I agree with you. Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
We've got a bigger drive coming up in a second. So. The ones that tend to eat people's lunch is where you're on the plain open hillside with high cover crops and the birds come off there like little crucifixes and they seem to take forever to get to you. And that's where people end up tracking and stopping the guns and missing. I always tell people that you should see the bird coming and judge its line of flight, and making that shot very sort of instinctively is what's going to kill those very high long pheasants.
We've been to London for the walking tour of the gun trade. We've traveled north to Scotland to take in some gorgeous scenery where high-flying pheasants challenge any wing shooter. While shoots like Scotland are all about quality over quantity, there are shoots around the globe that are the exact opposite. Welcome to central Argentina, or specifically the area around Cordoba. This is a wing shooter's dream trip. Here, it's difficult, if not impossible, to load fast enough to keep up with the birds.
I'd say that Argentina probably offers the finest wing shooting experience in the world. You know, a population of between 34 and 60 million dove in the Cordoba region offers wing shooting opportunities that can't be replicated anywhere else. I give it that it's a long journey, but it can be quite pleasant as well, traveling, you know, with friends and the experiences coming through Santiago, Cordoba, seeing the different cities as you travel. You know, I think that and the combination of the wing shooting opportunities make it worthwhile. This is dove heaven. The birds here in these several fields, I should imagine number in 10 to 15,000. This has just been freshly harvested wheat. The birds are not disturbed by our presence or the shooting simply because they're in dove heaven. They're having a feeding frenzy. Oh, they're too far out. Here's one for you, sir. That was a tough shot. How do we do it? Let me run you through the basics of a really good shot. It begins with footwork. The most deadliest move a bird shooter can make is with his feet. Let me demonstrate. By using my feet, I step into the line of the target, ensuring that when I make the shot, I'm in balance at the kill or break point of the target. Now let me show you what happens if you don't make that vital step into the line of the target. I make my move to the target, everything's fine, but now I'm running out of swing, rotation of the body, and the only way to keep on the bird is to transfer weight from one foot to the other, rainbowing or windscreen wiping my gun over the line of the target. 1/8 of an inch here at the gun is 2 feet at the target at 40 yards, meaning I miss several feet over the target. A simple step into the line would keep my shoulders parallel to the bird and the line of the bird, and therefore my rotation would be complete. One of these has got to offer himself up for a camera shot. It's a migratory dove, as in the United States, but instead of it migrating the season here, the climate at the foot of the Andes, you've got the very fertile valley. They can literally plant 3 to 4 crop rotations a year, whereas 2's the average in Europe and in America the same. So you have an abundance of food. The birds have got ample roost, more than enough food, and a very moderate weather or climatic zone, so there's no need to migrate anymore. And that gives them great breeding opportunities. The population is expanding you know, exponentially every year. And really the American shooter or the European shooter that comes here to hunt, they're literally doing a service to the farmers in the way of a crop protection. It's pest control. You aren't going to believe how neat this is. The dove's a challenging shot. You can have everything from a bird that simulates a high-driven pheasant to a driven grouse, and even a decoy duck. Some of them dropping into the scrub and the roost where you're shooting. So I think that is one of the most challenging birds, and I say the finest wing shooting practice in the world.
Any wing shooter who's ever been to South America knows the dove is the dominant bird south of the equator. But a shooter coming all this way for doves alone is cheating himself of another challenge. In Argentina and Paraguay, pigeon shooting is rapidly increasing in popularity. So much so that shooters like Chris are booking trips just for that reason.
That's a classic pigeon. Here's another one. The traditional European method of shooting the equivalent of this bird, the wood pigeon, is to decoy them and build a blind. You know, obviously you don't want to be seen. Any movement will make this bird flare and jink. And so you build patterns. As I say, drops in. There's one at 12 o'clock committed to this pattern. Classic pigeon, decoy pigeon. Coming straight in towards me. Sometimes it does work. I hit that one pretty hard, centered him. But you got to hit these birds hard. They're tough.
Well, Chris, every day I know you deal with the finest guns in the world, both side-by-sides and over-unders. So I just bought myself this little 28 gauge. What are some of the things I'm going to experience learning to shoot a side-by-side versus an over-under or a semi-auto?
The big difference between the side-by-side and the over and under, Bill, is basically one was designed to be shot a lot and carried a little, the over and under, more of a competition gun, and the side-by-side was meant to be carried a lot and shot a little, you know, what we'd call a game gun in England or a sporting gun in the United States, wing shooter's gun. Now, that said, they're now making over and unders very light in smaller gauges, so that difference is gone. The over and under has many advantages. You can see the barrels are superposed or stacked one on top of the other. That with a top rib gives it great rigidity in the same way as a rolled steel joist. So when you fire the gun, you do not get the flex in the tubes. A shotgun barrel is only as thin as a credit card, and it has to be flexible. If you ever see one in slow motion, the shot charge actually makes the barrel flex, hence Sir Joseph Whitworth's fluid steel invention. It flexes. This configuration stops that flex. Secondly, the recoil is in a direct line because the barrels are directly in line with the firing pins and the stock. And so that you have a direct recoil, no flex, and no second phase of recoil. And lastly, it's a single sight plane. If I asked you to point at anything, you do so with a single finger. You wouldn't point with two fingers. So when you fire this gun, what you find is the barrels are alongside each other and there's not as much rigidity, so you have a down flex, particularly in the smaller gauges where there's more pressure generated, the 28 and 410. So you have a little down flip. You can see that the barrels and the firing pins are ineffectively either side of the stock. So when you fire the empty gun, when you fire the gun, the barrel wants to go like this and actually twist itself off the water table or the action. So when you shoot the side-by-side, you have to have a different grip, a different hand action. It's much more important. You can get away with sloppy hands with an over and under because of its single phase of recoil and direct recoil. A great exercise or a great tip for a side-by-side shooter is to imagine the gun's made of a block of rubber and you pull the hands apart, not so much that you're, too much tension, but enough that the hands are aware of each other, and in this way you will control that two-phase recoil, and especially on the second barrel shot, which which is where you have the most effect, or it has its most effect, you will stay on the line far superior. And it's a great little exercise to do when you're not shooting, you know, just to practice at gun mount, and you'll find that that'll really improve your second barrel kills with a side-by-side.
Well, I think this is going to be a fun little gun, and I'm really looking forward to putting some of these tips into practice. So let's load up and hide for these pigeons.
No, I wish you luck with it, Bill. It's a great little gun, I've got to tell you. Thank you. Oh, no! I was trying to leave him for you, sir. I got that one, first barrel.
Shot.
Yeah. Well, that's the way to double them. Now, get up and kill him now. And again. See, nice second barrel. Now you're underneath him and behind you. Look at this for a shot.
Whether you shoot doves or quail in the United States, head across the pond to take in driven pheasant, or travel to South Africa chasing some truly exotic winged game, there are plenty of places to display your shooting skill, plenty of locations to experience wing shooting the world.